Welcome back to the Crypto World channel, everyone. My name is Josh, and right now, Bitcoin has just experienced a market crash after we broke this exact level of support. This means Bitcoin has now broken important market structure, and in just a moment, I'll be talking about how long, realistically speaking, it could take for Bitcoin to recover after this crash. I will also be covering other market metrics, such as the Bitcoin Fear and Greed Index, now in extreme fear, billions of dollars worth of Bitcoin that has just been liquidated, Bitcoin funding rates across all of these exchanges, and finally, towards the end of this video, I'll be talking about the stock market correction and how this has influenced the recent Bitcoin prices. This is an important one to watch all the way to the end of this video, so make sure you're doing that. And just before we jump into it, make sure to leave a like down below. And if you're new to the channel, you might as well subscribe with notifications turned on so that you're not missing out on any of these important updates in the future. But with all of that out of the way, let's get straight to what this video is about. So right here, we're on the Bitcoin US dollar charts on the daily time frame. And in my last few Bitcoin update videos, I was talking about this major upwards trending line of support, which was coming in close to 54,000 approximately. And basically in those videos, I was saying for as long as Bitcoin is holding above this line right here, we're actually still looking pretty good. We only start looking more bearish once we finally start breaking below this exact line right here. And so straight off the bat, I'm not going to pretend like I perfectly predicted this exact price action, because I did not. But with that being said, Bitcoin did end up heavily respecting this line right here, because you can see when we were holding above this line, we were simply just traveling sideways. We weren't really experiencing a lot of bearish price action right here over the past week or so, up until the exact moment we started breaking below this exact line. And it was only then that we finally start flipping into a lot more bearish price action. So now that Bitcoin has played out this move to the downside, of course, that does now mean that we are breaking market structure, but not necessarily breaking the daily uptrend, because an uptrend is really just higher highs and higher lows. And so far, at least at the time filming this video, the bottom of this crash is coming in at around 41,000 at the bottom of this wick. Now, of course, things can always change in the future, but that $41,000 level just there is a higher low compared to this previous low that we saw back at the end of September, which was coming in at around 39,500. So yes, Bitcoin in the shorter term is in a bearish trend. I have been saying that for a while on the smaller time frames, like the 4-hour chart, for example. Making lower highs and lower lows simply means we are in a short-term downtrend. But in terms of the larger trend on the daily time frame, technically speaking, we don't really start forming a downtrend on the larger time frames until we start putting in some lower lows and lower highs. And staying on the daily time frame, but taking a look at this Bitcoin chart, up until the exact moment that we broke below the 120-day SMA, we were playing out this correction pretty similar to the September correction. But one thing that we did not see just here, as Bitcoin was finding support along the 120-day SMA, was a bullish cross in the daily MACD. We were getting incredibly close to one, and if Bitcoin stayed up towards around 58,000 for even just one more day, then it's very likely that we would have seen a bullish cross in the daily MACD. But of course, that was not the case. We ended up seeing a little bit more bearish price action, which postponed the bullish cross, which basically just means that right now we do have a little while longer until we can confirm any sort of recovery. So don't necessarily expect a recovery extremely fast. And I'll talk more about the potential recovery for Bitcoin in just a moment. But for now, looking in the daily RSI, we are entering into oversold territories on the daily RSI. This is a rare occasion. We don't normally see opportunities like this very often. Just zooming out on the charts, the last time we saw the daily RSI for Bitcoin go into oversold territories was at the bottom of the crash that we saw during May. And obviously when Bitcoin was at those sort of prices just after we experienced a huge crash, and as the daily RSI was in oversold territories, that was one of the best buying opportunities that we've seen so far this year. Anyone that simply dollar cost average into Bitcoin the moment we started seeing some of these signals play out, if you simply held that Bitcoin for the next few months, you would have done very well. Zooming out even further, going back to the time before that, when the daily RSI entered into oversold territories, that was back during March 2020 when we had a huge crash to the downside. And once again, that turned out to be an amazing buying opportunity. In fact, the best buying opportunity that we've seen since the bottom of the 2018 bear market. And speaking about the March 2020 crash, I thought I should take this opportunity just to explain that Bitcoin has actually experienced far worse crashes in its past compared to the crash that we're seeing right now. And this March 2020 crash is a perfect example of that. Bitcoin crashed around 50% in one single day. And from top to bottom, Bitcoin crashed around 64% in just 1 month. Even just earlier this year, back in May, Bitcoin crashed around 50% to the downside in just 1.5 weeks. Compared to right now, over the past 1 day, Bitcoin has crashed around 28%. But from the all-time high to the bottom of this crash so far, we've crashed around 40% in close to 1 month. So for anyone out there that is panicking, that might be new to Bitcoin and might be thinking that this is the end of Bitcoin, Bitcoin is dead, all you need to do is zoom out further on the charts and realize that Bitcoin has experienced far more severe bearish price action in its past compared to what we're seeing right now. So believe it or not, this is pretty standard stuff for Bitcoin. And Bitcoin Bitcoin's volatility is the price that we pay for Bitcoin's incredible performance. Now, zooming out to the weekly time frame for Bitcoin, what we have here is the 20-week simple moving average. Right now, that is coming in at around 51,500 US dollars. So clearly Bitcoin has broken below that level, but we still have around 1.5 days to go for the weekly candle close. And so we only technically break below this level if we see a weekly candle close below that level, which at this point, it does seem more likely we'll see a weekly candle close below this moving average. But Bitcoin has done crazier things in the past, so I'll definitely be keeping an eye on this weekly candle close to see whether or not we close above or below 51,500 US dollars. And basically, if Bitcoin sees a strong weekly candle close below this moving average, then that is clearly a bearish signal, and we haven't actually seen that since May this year. And when you're simply taking a look at what happened last time Bitcoin broke below this moving average, we actually entered into a little bit more of a bearish time period in the market for the next couple months, and we did not start to see any sort of recovery back to the upside until around 2 to 3 months after we initially broke below this moving average. Zooming out on the chart, going to the time before that, that was during March 2020. Once again, we broke below this moving average, which was obviously a very bearish signal. And measuring out from the points that we broke below that moving average up to the points that we finally recovered back above the moving average, that was around 1.5 to 2 months. But this time around, the recovery began almost immediately after we finished the crash. And the time before that was during the end of 2019, when Bitcoin broke below this moving average back in September 2019. Once again, that was acting as a bearish signal, showing us that we are due for a little bit more of a bearish time period in the market. And measuring out that time period that we stayed somewhat bearish in the market, that was around 3 to 3.5 months approximately, until we started flipping more bullish again. So simply going off previous Bitcoin price action, if we do end up seeing this weekly candle close below 51,500 US dollars, then it is quite likely that we could take in between 1 to 3 months before Bitcoin can finally recover back towards these higher prices. But do not let that turn you away from the crypto markets, because of course, during these time periods just here, they were absolutely the best opportunities to stay active in the crypto markets, because they provided the best opportunities to get involved. Of course, not financial advice. That's just telling you what has happened in Bitcoin's past. And using March 2020 as another example again, even though it took Bitcoin around a month to finally recover back towards this moving average, in terms of bullish price action kicking in again, that was almost immediately after we saw the huge capitulation to the downside, which formed a major wick to the downside. And right now, Bitcoin is forming a very similar candle to all of these previous candles where we have experienced a market crash and reached a market bottom, simply based on the massive wick to the downside, showing us that there's a lot of buyers for Bitcoin down at these lower prices. Now, talking about one of the causes for this Bitcoin crash, which was of course a huge amount of Bitcoin positions getting liquidated. In fact, over the past 4 hours, over $1.5 billion US dollars worth of crypto positions, mostly long positions, have been completely liquidated. Over the past 12 hours, over 2 billion worth of positions have been liquidated, and within the last one full day, around $2.5 billion US dollars worth of positions have been completely liquidated. Anytime the liquidation counter reaches numbers like this, that is how you know that we've just experienced a huge move, and that is also how you know a lot of crypto has changed hands. Obviously, going from leverage positions and weak hands panic selling their crypto, and moving into the strong hands, the Bitcoin hodlers that are buying right now. And talking about buying right now, I am dollar cost averaging into Bitcoin, as I have been mentioning over the past week or so. Of course, it's important to not go all in at any given price level, because as I've been explaining over the past 1 week, it's not impossible for us to experience more bearish price action coming soon, which is why I have been saying I'm just slowly dollar cost averaging into Bitcoin and not just going all in at once. And one of the big reasons why I'm buying into Bitcoin right now is because we're sitting in extreme fear on the Bitcoin Fear and Greed Index. Historically speaking, anytime we've seen extreme fear, that has usually been a pretty good opportunity to accumulate Bitcoin for the longer term. But this indicator doesn't necessarily confirm the exact bottom. It just usually gives us a pretty good signal on when to accumulate Bitcoin or when to take profits out of Bitcoin. This chart just here is the Bitcoin to US dollar chart on the daily time frame, with the Bitcoin Fear and Greed Index overlaid on top of the chart. And these green zones just here, those are the times where we're sitting in extreme fear on this index. And what you can see here is, historically speaking, once again, during the times of extreme fear, they were usually the best times to just dollar cost average into Bitcoin and hold for the longer term. Now, with that being said, it didn't necessarily tell us the exact bottom. For example, back during March this year, we hit extreme fear, and for the next few days, the Bitcoin price still dropped a little bit further to the downside before then we started to bottom out. But either way, simply dollar cost averaging into Bitcoin during that entire time period just there, if you were holding for the longer term, that worked out as an amazing buying opportunity if you remained patient. Also during the end of September right here, but more recently, we did have a flash of extreme fear just the other day, around a week ago. And yes, that was a short-term bottom for Bitcoin, and we did end up experiencing some short-term gains over the next few days. But clearly, that was not the bottom for this correction, just like how the first time we entered into extreme fear back here during May, that was not the bottom for this correction, but it still acted acted as a great signal preparing us for a good time to accumulate Bitcoin. Now, once again, none of that's financial advice. That's just telling you what this indicator means for Bitcoin and what it's done for Bitcoin historically speaking. And right now we are sitting in extreme fear. And just judging from the current price action, it is quite likely that we would stay in extreme fear for at least a little while now, possibly over the next few days or even over the next few weeks, meaning that Bitcoin is likely about to develop another large green zone on this chart, similar to these previous times on the chart back here. Quickly talking about the Bitcoin funding rates across all of these exchanges, right now we are finally seeing negative funding rates coming into play. Throughout this correction, we've seen mostly neutral funding rates and even some funding rates still more positive than normal, but this is really the first time in around 2 whole months that we're finally seeing a lot of negative funding rates across these exchanges. I've explained what these funding rates actually mean for Bitcoin in past videos, but for the beginners out there, all you need to know is that when the funding rates are extremely positive, Bitcoin is at risk of potentially experiencing some more bearish price action, as we have the most room to the downside when the funding rates are extremely positive. But when the funding rates are negative, like what we're seeing right now, that means Bitcoin is due to see some sort of bounce sometime soon, or at least some reduced selling pressure moving forward, as the room to the downside in the Bitcoin price is very limited anytime we're seeing extremely negative funding rates. Now, quickly talking about the stock market, this is really important for crypto holders because, as I've said time and time again on this channel, Bitcoin and crypto in general is heavily correlated to whatever the stock market is doing. By the way, this is the S&P 500 index on the daily time frame, and just as an example, back here during September, the S&P 500 was experiencing a correction, and that was exactly what Bitcoin did during September as well. And then the moment we started entering into October, the S&P 500 began recovering back to the upside, exactly like what Bitcoin did. And a few weeks ago, we experienced a bearish divergence on the daily time frame for the S&P 500, which, by the way, I did cover on the channel right back here, saying that we could be due for a little bit more bearish price action in the stock market, and that could likely influence crypto prices. And so obviously that is now playing out. And so this is just another reason why crypto is experiencing some bearish price action in the shorter term, simply because of the stock market experiencing bearish price action. And yes, there are external factors that influence the price of the stock market, such as the news going around about the new flu variant, for example. But keep in mind, no matter what happens, whether we bottom out here or go further to the downside, all of this bearish price action is simply temporary, like what we saw back in September. And even in a more severe scenario, like what we saw back during March 2020, there was a lot of people thinking that the world was going to end right then and there, saying that we're about to enter a huge multi-year recession. And of course, that did not end up happening. This was only temporary. And right now, this bearish price action is only temporary. And during times like this, it is very important to follow me over on my Twitter for extra real-time updates throughout the day. For example, I have been updating you while this crash has been playing out so far. And the link to my official Twitter account is in the description down below and also in the pinned comments. Currently, my crypto portfolio is down hundreds of thousands of dollars, but I'm not selling anything and I'm only looking to accumulate more, because selling Bitcoin after we experience a crash when prices are cheap is completely back to front. And once you realize the fact that crypto is not going anywhere anytime soon, for example, PayPal and a lot of big banks around the world have implemented crypto services. Huge companies like MicroStrategy and Tesla are still holding billions of dollars worth of Bitcoin, and entire countries like El Salvador still have Bitcoin as their legal tender and are in fact buying even more Bitcoin on this correction. And so once you realize that, it actually becomes really easy to just accumulate Bitcoin and hold for the longer term. But of course, once again, that's not financial advice. That's just telling you my Bitcoin strategy and my personal perspective. And if you enjoyed this video or got something valuable out of it, please make sure to leave a like down below. And if you're new to the channel, make sure to subscribe with notifications turned on for more updates just like this every single day. I honestly do appreciate all of your support in the channel at the moment. I can't thank you guys enough. I'm sure I'm going to receive some negative comments down below, as I always do anytime the market crashes. But to be honest, I take that as an extra sign to accumulate more Bitcoin. And before you click off, make sure you're checking out one of these uploads just here if you haven't already. I've got a Bitcoin trading tutorial video in the top left, and in the bottom left, I've got a passive income video showing you how I earn passive income every day on my crypto holdings. And so watching a video like that is really important, especially during these bearish times in the market. But anyway, that is it for this video. I really hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you all in the next video.